you say the words, we have to admit it, you say the words love and sex with a robot, and Woody Allen, right, springs to mind, or perhaps some lonely, seedy man pushing himself into an inflatable doll. It's hard not to laugh. And yet we know that pornography and sex toys have gone mainstream in our society, so maybe what our next speaker has to say is not so far-fetched. And when I was thinking about all of this and looking ahead to what we'll be discussing later this afternoon, it struck me that as we push longevity further and further out, that there will be those of advanced years who perhaps have lost a long-time partner and neither have the inclination or the energy or the patience anymore to go find another. And so it seems to me they might become a very plausible market for care-giving robots who might in turn become partner robots. Dr. Levy?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Moses. I'd like to invite you for the next 20 minutes to join me in a voyage of exploration to the outer limits of what will be possible with artificial intelligence in the coming decades. I have a great deal of optimism as to what AI can achieve. It's true that in the first 50 years of AI, there were successes and some other areas of research that weren't so successful. I'm fortunate because I was able to witness in an area that I understand quite well, which is chess, the progress from programs that were so weak when I first got involved in AI in 1967. The chess programs of that year were so weak that reasonably strong players like myself would laugh at the moves they made. We would point at the board and say, ho, ho, this is a typical computer move. How ludicrous. But only 30 years later, I stood in almost amazement in New York in 1997 and watched Garry Kasparov, the greatest human player that the world has ever seen, be blown off the board in the final decisive game of his match with Deep Blue, blown off the board in 1 hour. A normal Grandmaster game lasts 4 hours. If you lose in 3, you haven't done well. If you lose in 2, it's quite a disaster. To lose in an hour is incredible. And what that showed was that in some areas of AI, the researchers have been enormously successful. And I believe that in the next 30 or 40 years, AI will advance beyond our wildest dreams, beyond anyone's imagination. And the reason why I'm so optimistic, a lot of the reason could be seen yesterday in the figures that Ray Kurzweil showed in his talk. He showed how computer hardware becomes faster and faster, and it has done so for many years. There's Moore's law, which shows the doubling of hardware speeds very rapidly. And not only hardware speeds, but computer memories become bigger and bigger. Another very important factor in the acceleration of AI research is something that Ray Kurzweil wrote in one of his books. He said the following: in the next 100 years, we will not see a single century of progress in technological research. We will see 10,000 years of progress at today's rate. And the reason is that technology itself, the rate at which technology is advancing, is itself increasing. It's exponential. The more we know about a science, about a technology, the quicker it is to discover the next great thing in that science or technology. And so I'm quite convinced that within the next 30 or 40 years, AI will take us to the point where computer programs, and therefore robots, will not only have made enormous advances in the intelligence of electronics, of computers, of robots, but also in other areas of human thinking that link to intelligence, to emotion, for example. There are scientists working on creating artificial emotions. You see some of these in computer games at the moment. And with emotions come artificial personalities. And there are also people now working for the past few years on creating artificial consciousness. So what I'd like us to do today is to think, what will life be like when these robots have almost a superhuman intelligence and emotions and personality and consciousness at a level equaling, if not exceeding, those of human beings? How will we relate to them? How will our relationships with them look? What will it mean to us? What kind of people will we become as a result of our relationships with these robots? And it's with the current state of the art in human-like robots that I want to really start our journey. And the state of the art really is typified by a Japanese professor, Hiroshi Ishiguro, who builds robots in the likeness of people. He built one that looks exactly like his 5-year-old daughter. And then he became quite famous very quickly in Japan for this. And he became so famous, he was invited all over Japan to talk about his work. And he thought, well, you know, I don't really want to go to all these places. It's a lot of travel, it's a lot of time, it's very tiring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build some robots that look like me, and I'll send the robots to give the talks. So he's done this, and he sends robots off periodically. They look like him. They're very convincing images. And they give talks. And as a result of that, he became even more famous, and he was reported on in all the Japanese media and on Japanese TV. Here you can see what Ishiguro looks like, and this is a TV newscaster. Now, the robots that he builds, he says, are convincing enough so that if you walk into a room with one, for about 10 seconds you can be confused into thinking it's human. But that's just the beginning, because this 10 seconds over a period of a few years research and development will grow into 10 minutes and then into 10 hours, and they will get more and more human-like. Oh my goodness, I made a mistake. No. She's not a newscaster, she's a robot. But if you saw her photograph in a book and said Japanese newscaster, whatever her name is, you would believe it was a newscaster, not a robot. And this is the only slide I'm showing today. I just want to show you this because we saw yesterday the medical robots that were going like this and doing wonderful operations in the operating theatre. And Dave Williams showed that he was on the end of a robot arm on the spaceship. So I just want to show that today we actually have robots that are very, very convincing and human-like in appearance. Now imagine what these robots will look like and talk like, and how that we will feel about them. Try to imagine yourself years from now, a few decades from now, when these robots have personalities that are very human-like, they have human-like intelligence at a very high level, they exhibit human emotions, they exhibit human consciousness. How will we feel when a robot says to us, "I love you," and says it as though it means it? How will we feel when a robot puts its arms around us and kisses us passionately, as though it means it? And this is really what I would like to take you on this journey to explore. So let's start talking about love. Why do we fall in love? What are the reasons? I looked, when I started my research, at the research psychology, reasons why psychologists have found we fall in love. And a couple of the most prominent reasons are, one is called reciprocal liking. What this means is that Peter is much more likely to fall in love with Mary if he already knows that Mary likes him or loves him. Now, think about a robot. A robot can be programmed. A robot can be programmed, a female robot called Mary could be programmed to tell Peter, the human, that she really likes him. Suddenly that engenders in Peter a greater likelihood that he's going to fall for Mary, the robot. One of the reasons that motivates us to have sex, one of the most common reasons, can be seen in the research psychology on why people pay for sex, why people go to prostitutes. One of the most common reasons given by people who use prostitutes a lot is that they enjoy variety. They like to have sex with different people, they like different sexual experiences. Now let's turn to the question of why do we enjoy sex? Having discussed why we're motivated to have it, why do we enjoy it so much? Well, the most common reason, I think, is clear. It's the pure physical pleasure of orgasm. Now, there are companies who make silicone sex dolls that are life-sized and lifelike in appearance. They have no electronic parts. They just lie there. So just imagine what will happen when some electronics are added, when there are some vibrating parts put into these dolls, give them some synthetic speech, have them moaning and making all the right noises when they're in bed, caress the nipples of the female ones, stroke the male ones. When an erogenous zone is touched, all the right sounds come out. So how will this affect society? What will this mean to us? Will we change as people? How are our relationships with robots going to develop? Well, relationships have changed a lot. What is acceptable in relationships and what is normal in relationships have changed a lot in the last 100 years or so. Go back quickly, take your minds back to the beginning of the 20th century. You're only 65 years after the last two men were hanged in England for being homosexual and behaving in a way that they found completely natural. Only 65 years before the beginning of the 20th century. So there have been huge changes in social attitudes, social mores, attitudes to relationships. And just as Ray Kurzweil has pointed out that in science and technology, the rate of progress is accelerating, the rate of social change is also accelerating. And that's why I believe very strongly, and I explain this in the book, that by the time sophisticated robots are available that are able to carry on meaningful conversations with us, entertain us with their conversation, make jokes with us, talk to us about anything that we want to talk about, by the time that robots have artificial personalities that we can enjoy, that we experience something with them which is similar to, or maybe even better than, the experience that we feel when we meet somebody who we think has a pleasant personality. Robots that have artificial consciousness, so that we interact with them as though almost they're human. By then, which I predict will be around the year 2050, I think that our attitudes to relationships with robots, both loving relationships and sexual relationships, will have advanced. Why will they have advanced? Because nowadays kids grow up being used to electronics. They have electronic toys. They almost have something electronic in their cot when they come home from the maternity hospital. So because of all these factors, people will be falling in love with robots. When you fall in love with someone, it's not uncommon to want to marry them. And sex, of course, is quite a natural desire, especially for someone you're in love with. Now, why would someone want to love and have sex with a robot? Let me leave you with this thought. There are millions and millions of people in our world who are lonely and miserable because they have no one to love, they have no one who loves them. There might be all sorts of reasons for it. They might be shy, they might have psychological hang-ups, they might have psychosexual problems, they might have unfortunate personalities. Whatever the reason, there are millions and millions and millions of them. I mean, I told you about Anthony, who found it difficult to find girlfriends. There are people who cannot attract other people for loving and sexual relationships to satisfy them. Wouldn't the world be a much happier place if the void in their lives, this huge void, could be filled? And it will be with robots. Thank you.